Robert's Rules of Order are imperative to being successful in YDSC and in DC. On our tour in the way to the Appropriations Committee hearing, we may pass other members of Congress like Ted Cruz or Josh Hawley. Please remember to not feed the animals or put your hands outside of the assigned lane we're in. The committee is proposing legislation towards the fiscal year 2021. Our cast of characters this evening includes the following. Chairwoman Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut, played by YDSC National Committee member and award-winning Bree Spalding. We've got congressional heartthrob Tim Ryan of Ohio, and that'll be played by YDSC First Vice President Charles Fricka. Out and proud and balding, Congressman Mark Pocan from Wisconsin, portrayed by none other than Young Dems of Central Midlands Chair Dylan Gunnels, and badass Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California, and she'll be played by my friend and badass and vice chair of the Orangeburg Calhoun Young Dems, Malaya Waller. And I'm Phil Ford. I'm your sassy, out loud and proud YDSC National Committee member, and I'll be your narrator this evening. Before we go into the committee room, let's take care of a few housekeeping items. Please place yourself on mute so we don't distract others. If you would like to be recognized, please raise your hand in the chat function or let us know through the chat box. We'll pause for a second to make sure that everybody is muted. And I think we still have some folks joining the tour. There will be built-in breaks or pauses to answer questions. Should your question not be addressed this evening, please email us at ydscnationalcommitteemembers@gmail.com. The third and final housekeeping item on our list is to please reference your YDA Roberts Rules of Order cheat sheet that you have received. We'll be placing that link shortly in the chat box if you're unable to locate it. So without further ado, we'll be joining a meeting in progress after our Democratic-led Congress has approved the prior meeting minutes and continues to work to fund public health initiatives.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. I would like to remind the committee that we are now under new leadership and the Republicans suspended the rules in the last meeting. For what reason, we will never know, probably something shady. But we would like to reinstate the rules of the committee and move forward with our meeting. Are there any questions? Seeing and hearing none, Mr. Secretary, will you please take the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Chair DeLauro?
Here.
Representative Mark Pocan?
Here.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee?
Here.
Madam Chair, that is all in attendance.
Thank you, Secretary Ryan. For our first matter of business is to increase the amount of funding to the National Institute of Health from $10 billion to $30 billion for fiscal year 2021.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity. I would like to move to increase the amount of funding to the NIH from $10 billion to $30 billion. Point of clarification, this would be a $20 billion increase to the fund.
I rise to a point of order, Madam Chair. Given our funding situation, I disagree with increasing funding to the National Institute of Health at this time when it can go directly to the people of this great country.
I understand your concerns. I believe that we should not consider this motion at this time.
Madam Chair, I would like to appeal the decision of the chair.
Second.
I choose not to consider the motion due to the concerns brought up by Congresswoman Lee.
Madam Chair, this motion is to increase funding to the NIH, one of the world's most premier health research facilities, and has helped with developing healthcare backgrounds, including including a new vaccine for the novel coronavirus. We have the purview and the money to increase funding to the NIH, and I want us to increase the funding from $10 billion to $30 billion for fiscal year 2021. We can send money by way of another committee directly to the people and still increase funding to the NIH.
Do any other members have any debates towards the chair's decision? Seeing and hearing none, the decision of the chair has been appealed. The question now stands: shall the decision of the chair to be considered for the motion not to be considered of increasing the funding to the NIH stand as the judgment of the committee? All those in favor of letting the chair's decision to not consider the motion stand, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay.
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 The chair's decision has been appealed and is not considered judgment of the committee.
All right, so we are at our first break. What you just saw was an appeal of the chair's decision. Appeals can be brought up if a member thinks that the chair's decision might not be correct. In this case, the chair decided not to consider a motion of increasing NIH funding as someone brought up a point of order that made the chair believe that it shouldn't be considered. Other things can be appealed, including amendments not germane to an original rule. These are debatable in most instances, except when due to decorum or priority of business. The chair cannot be appealed in matters of opinion, and it matters to the chair's judgment of a vote, often a voice vote. This goes into division, which we will see next. So I will hold for any questions. Are there any hands raised? All right, Congressman Pokin, there is a question here. Does the motion need a second before discussion?
Now, does the motion to appeal need a second? Is that the question?
Carolyn, can you give us a little clarification on that? Which motion?
Yes, normally like in our meetings, if there's a motion on the floor, it has to receive a second before it can be discussed.
Yes, yeah, and in this particular instance, it does as well. And Tim Ryan, our actor Charles, seconded in this instance. That's an appeal would need a second.
Okay, should have been second before Congresswoman Lee made her objection.
No, the appeal happened after the decision of the chair. The appeal was the decision of the chair.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Are there any other questions at this point? Well, we're breezing right through this tour in this committee hearing. That hardly ever happens, folks. And you can read more about this in the Roberts Rules of Order, section 24, 12th edition. But please be reminded that as you're watching this meeting, Colorado Congresswoman and 4-time arrested Lauren Boebert may rear her QAnon head in the meeting. Do not be distracted as we push for what's best for America. So now back to the Appropriations Committee hearing.
Madam Chair, I move to increase funding to the NIH from $10 billion to $30 billion as mentioned before.
I second.
The motion has been so moved and seconded. Any debate? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
It is the chair's opinion that the ayes do have it.
Division. Madam Chair, I call division, as anyone knows that one loud vote is worth 2 votes.
Division has been called and recognized by the chair. We will now do a rising vote. All in favor of increasing the funding to the NIH from $10 billion to $30 billion, please rise. And all those in favor, please stand. You may have your seats. All those opposed. You may take your seats. Any abstentions? With a vote of 2-1-0, the resolution does pass.
Madam Chair, as I have done the past 3 sessions, I would like to introduce a resolution which unfortunately has been voted down every time. I'm hoping the committee has had a change of heart. So with that in mind, I would like to again introduce a resolution which adds another $10 million to our public health budget so that we may study the benefits of eating ginger.
Madam Chair, I object to the consideration of the question. There are many other issues that must be considered before we should spend $10 million on the ginger that we consume at Mio's.
The member objects to the consideration of the resolution. I will now ask the secretary to call a roll call vote. All those opposed to the resolution being considered at this time, please signify by saying aye. All of those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Yes, Madam Chair. Congresswoman Barbara Lee,
Nay.
Representative Mark Pocan,
Aye.
Chair DeLauro,
Aye.
and myself, aye.
There are 2/3 opposed to considering the resolution at this time, so it will not be considered. Sorry, Congressman.
All right, so we've reached another break in our meeting. In this section, we saw a couple of rules that may have been seen in some of your meetings. The first is division. You have the right as a single lone member to demand the vote be immediately taken by a rising vote, as you saw some of the swim trunks, pajama pants, that sort of thing going on, home vibes or home office vibes. But any member can call for that. In any situation when you're in doubt of the result of a voice vote or a vote by a show of hands, be quick to your feet and shout division. So you want to be loud enough for the chair to hear you. The second is an objection to consideration of a matter. Any member may raise objection by interrupting the speaker. So you don't have to wait until they're done. You can interrupt the speaker. With that being said, no second is needed. However, 2/3 vote will be needed to move on from the objection. I see we have one question in there from Amy. Amy down from the Low Country, how's it going? Thank you for the question. No, it doesn't matter. It's preference of the person. Sometimes you hear in Congress even they'll say nay or no, just depending on preference of each member. Yep, Jonah.
I don't know, it seemed a bit odd that when she was able to say the one loud no counts as more, could that actually lead to like reconsideration, or could something like that actually lead to reconsideration of the most recent vote?
Yes, it can. And we were kind of being in jest there. We were trying to be funny, but the reality is when you're taking a voice vote, clearly that's just up to the discretion of the chair based on if he or she hears that the ayes have it or the yays have it. And so sometimes people will get a little loud on their side so that they hope that they can get that vote. And so the reality is if there's any discrepancy from the floor of individuals feeling like it wasn't what the chair deemed it was, then division can be called. So we were kind of being funny with that, but that is a reality that the loudness of people can lead to a discrepancy on the vote.
Okay, so would it be just I could easily see, a loud no being counted as, the exact same and otherwise being ignored. Would it be more effective to, could a person say, I call for a division or something like that?
I'm not sure I fully understand what your question is.
Like rather than saying, no, I'm now using a loud no, could we be like, I call for a division vote, or I call for a revote or something.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So division would only be called again if there was a voice vote that was taken.
Okay.
So again, the person would say the ayes, and then they would say, and then the nays, and they would say, and then they would say, it's the opinion of the chair that the ayes do have it. If a person who voted nay then feels like the chair misheard and there were more nays than ayes, then that person would call division. But you
Okay.
wouldn't just call division unless you feel like the chair's decision was incorrect.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Mhm. Division just forces there be a rising vote.
In addition, it's also really not useful, but it really comes into basically really importance when you say have a giant meeting, oftentimes in person, where suddenly there's so many voices, and everyone is almost evenly divided, that it's very hard to make an accurate call to a voice vote, if that makes sense. So this is something we might see a little bit more often, maybe in person. But again, the joke to one loud no, right, is with volumes, voices, and if someone thinks that the vote was counted incorrectly, you can immediately call for division, if that makes sense, Jonah.
Oftentimes at the state party convention will be votes, a rising vote.
Yeah.
Just to make sure, because people are talking over everybody, people are still campaigning for other positions, that sort of thing. So you'll see that sort of take place in that capacity, but much more in person than in our reality that we have right now with virtual meetings.
And as a side note to that too, which we covered in our last session, but I think voting is something that we deal with in almost every meeting. So it's good to remember it is the discretion of the chair to determine whether or not they want to do a voice vote or a roll call vote in that moment. So typically we hear a voice vote, right, of A versus nay. If it's a 2/3 vote, of course, that has to be a roll call vote so that you have that on record. But the chair could also make that decision if they know it's been kind of a heated discussion or maybe a contested piece of legislation, and it's probably going to be close. The chair could just say, this will be a roll call vote, and they'll move forward that way.
And if you've been watching Senate Bill 1, Senate President Harvey Peeler has been doing a roll call vote from almost every vote related to it, unless it's holding over an amendment until a later time. So anytime there's a vote on something, he's gone directly into a roll call vote. All right, so there will be time at the end to ask some more questions, but thank you all for your patience and your willingness to learn with us. I especially think there are some members of Congress that should do the same, especially Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Congresswoman who has zero understanding of how Congress works and has been suspended from Twitter, like former President Inmate Number 1. So without further ado, we will get back to our previously scheduled program.
Our last order of business for today is to send this bill to full committee for consideration. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that the previously approved recommendation be sent to the full Appropriations Committee for consideration.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is the opinion of the chair that the ayes have it, and we will move this bill as packaged to the full committee for consideration. Lastly, I want to recap a few events that have happened today and things that we've done and talked about as we begin to move forward and see if there's any announcements from the floor. We passed last meeting's minutes at the top of this meeting. So thank you all for that. And thank you to our secretary, Mr. Ryan, for such a wonderful job in making sure those are nice and accurate, that attendance is recorded, and that all input that needed to be on the record was reflected in our minutes. Thank you so much. We also discussed several funding items for the NIH as proposed and voted to increase some funding. and we'll hopefully circle back around to Congresswoman Lee's proposal in our next meeting. And with that, I do want to take a point of privilege before I get into the announcements to give such a round of applause to our inaugural committee and everything they did for the inauguration, and how beautiful the inauguration was. And the fashion, I must say, was out of this world. The fashion police were very happy with everyone's outfits. Y'all couldn't see me. I wasn't there in person, but I was dressed out too, had my chucks and my pearls on, but it was so nice. So I just wanted to take a moment to say that. So if you served and did anything, I thank you. You did a wonderful job. Any announcements?
So, Madam Chair, I would like to announce that I will be putting forth a resolution in the full body of the fabulous women at the inauguration as well, to receive the Congressional Medal of Freedom. They looked fierce, okay? Fierce. They sounded amazing, and they are leading by example. So the motivation behind this effort is that Lady Gaga has promised me the dove, you know, that big beautiful dove she had. Yeah, she promised me the dove and olive branch brooch she wore. So if this matter passes, I'm looking forward to that. So y'all better be with me. I gotta have that brooch.
Thank you so much to the gentle lady from California. And I may have to borrow that. So we're going to have to get that done, guys. Any other announcements on the floor? All right. Well, I'm not seeing any. So since we have no other further business and we've taken care of everything we need to today, I would like to call this meeting adjourned. Thank you so much for being here.
All right, so that is the end of the hearing as we've seen it. So in this section, you've seen moving a bill to the full committee and adjournment of meetings. Meetings can be adjourned in multiple ways. One of the most common ways is for a body to make a motion to adjourn a meeting. You'll second and then vote on it. This is the way that we ended today was a regular meeting that just normally goes through a complete order of business and can just be adjourned by the chair, asking if there is any further business, and then just naturally adjourning the meeting. More can be read about that in your handy dandy Robert's Rules of Order, 12th edition in chapter 21. I will also go ahead and make an announcement, since it wasn't a part of the committee hearing, that I am trying to work on a deal with a local bookstore to get us a bulk rate for Robert's Rules of Order. So we will be reaching out soon with a sign-up form. So we will let you all know about that. But now let's take the last few questions, if there are any. Paula, you can go ahead. You're still on mute.
There
There we go.
Thank you. So I appreciate your going through this so that many of us can better understand. If, for example, I asked for an item to put on the agenda for this evening, and we started the meeting and the item wasn't on the agenda, yet somebody called for the orders of the day, because it says at the beginning of the meeting, the agenda was adopted. The chairman, right, called for the orders of the day. How would I bring up the fact that my item was not in the agenda so that it gets considered during that meeting, and it doesn't just get pushed off to the side to not be considered?
I'm going to let Dylan answer this, but things can always be changed. Nothing is ever done permanently, I will say. But Dylan, if you want to specifically, I'm going to be looking for the page in the book as well while you're.
Well, that's what I was looking, because I was trying to remember, did we do this last
We did, in
Yeah.
fact.
Felt
So,
like I learned something new myself last week, actually, so I don't want to steer the wrong way.
Paula, what we did last time was we had another really great course. And during that course, we actually suspended our rules in order to add on to the agenda item. That was limited to just adding on the additional agenda item. So we suspended our rules, added the agenda item, and then went back into our regular meeting after reinstating the rules, if that makes sense. So that's how we addressed that issue when we came about it. So when we didn't have the meeting agenda item on, we suspended the rules, we added the agenda item, and then we reinstated the rules and continued on with our meeting.
Okay, so is the person who wanted that seen on the agenda, I could speak up before they called for orders of the day or something, it says, but I could speak up and say, Madam Chairman, there's a motion to add what was sent to you to add to this agenda for the day. And then somebody else would say, yes, I second that. And then it would be added. Is that how it would work? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, in
Yep.
essence. Oh, go ahead, Phil.
No, yeah. So you'd in order to amend it, you would make the motion, second the motion, and vote on it.
All right, thank you very much.
Our esteemed president of YDSC and SCDP, third vice chair, has put the recording to the first meeting in the chat box. So you can see that there if you want to take a peek at that.
Okay.
And
All
we
right.
will be having a third meeting in February. We haven't picked a date yet, but we will let you guys know by Mobilize, and we will email you probably 3 or 4 times to remind you, as Mobilize likes to do.
Wonderful.
Are there any other questions?
Mm-mm.
I see someone asked if Micah was from Charleston. He's from the upstate. I'll go ahead and answer that one for you.
Thank you, Phil.
You're welcome. Carol, the access passcode is right underneath the link. It says Young Dems 2021 $.
I also put an easier drive link in the chat box. So if anyone wants to save that, you can. You shouldn't have to have access to that.
But without any further questions, I'll give you guys another 10 seconds or so.
I also want to add one thing, Phil, if I may. Further up in the chat is also the YDA Robert's Rules cheat sheet. I will add it again for those of you who jumped in after 6/12, because that's when I posted it, and sometimes it doesn't allow you to see anything else. I will add it again now, but if you don't have that, please download that out of the chat. It's a great tool to have on hand when you're attending these different meetings. It's not just focused on YDSC or YDA meetings. It's Robert's rules in general, and they're pretty common rules that you may come across and have encounters with. And it lets you know if you need a second, if you don't, if you can interrupt someone, if you can't. It also lets you know if you need a 2/3 vote out of that motion for it to pass. It lets you know a lot of really quick things that you may be wondering, or if you have a question, want to use point of order or point of privilege, it explains some of that for you as well. And our first video really explains point of order and point of privilege really well as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
Because I can't raise my hand because I'm one of the hosts. But what if you have a chair that's kind of pushing back and doesn't want to hear your call for division and just kind of wants to move on.
I haven't ever experienced
I've never
that.
experienced that.
I don't know, Jenny, what would you do? I mean, you've been with YDSC and YDA.
So I've experienced it in YDA meetings. So we know that the first thing to do is go on to the parliamentarian, and then the chair can be called out of order and suspended from the meeting and removed from the meeting. If they don't hear your motions, if they don't hear your division, if they ignore you, they can be called out of order as well.
Very cool.
Good
I
to
know
know.
that Bree, myself, and Jenny have caused a little ruckus at the YDA meeting.
We've caused good trouble. We've caused very good trouble.
We've used a lot of these avenues to just let you know, to call out issues and the process. There's a way to use these rules to call out process. There's also ways to use this to delay things. If you're missing a couple of votes, you can start to delay things with a point of privilege, a point of order, you know, and then asking for a roll call, and then that may give you enough time for your 3 neighbors to get to your precinct meeting to vote on whatever it may be. But it's possible to do those types of things. I don't recommend it necessarily if you're trying to get business done, but it can be done, and sometimes you have to send a message with these rules. Jonah?
Just to, I guess, clarify, so in a situation like where Jenny was just talking about, the person would, whoever it is that's trying to get the attention would simply say, point of order, the chairman, I announce that the chairman is out of order. Is that how that would go, or what would be said there?
So it involves getting the parliamentarian involved and then going to the disciplinary section of Robert's rules that's very specific on how to call a chair out of order. And it's more of it's an intense process, but it's like if I'm running one of our board and council meetings and I decide not to listen to the members who are putting out points of order, and I keep saying the chair does not recognize you. The chair does not recognize you. If that
I've seen that
happens over
happen.
and over again, like you can call the chair out of order to get the vice chair involved. That's why most committees all have vice chairs. Because while they're looking at suspending or censoring or doing whatever, if disciplinary action is warranted on this chair, the vice chair would step in and run the meeting.
We have seen that as well, and it goes down the ladder, each rung of the ladder, if you will. We've seen the president of YDA step out of a meeting, then executive vice president step out of a meeting. I think it ended up going down to secretary of YDA. I think that was that our spring meeting?
It was.
Yeah, our spring meeting. So there are definitely times that you can call out leadership running the meeting, and sometimes they will voluntarily leave when that happens. Other times they'll be suspended, as Jenny has described.
Because at the end of the day, we're a democracy. We're not a dictatorship. So the chair might be the chair, but they don't have the power.
Mm-hmm. Just to put this out there, I wasn't referring to you there, Jenny. I was referring to something I heard on NPR.
Y'all can call me out of order whenever. Phil, there was something in the chat, agenda question. Did you see that from Carolyn?
No, that was not a question. That was just letting you know where you can find the information on the agenda items that was questioned earlier.
Okay, wonderful.
Thanks. All right. So if there are any other questions, you can, like I said, email those to YDSC National Committee members at gmail.com. Hopefully that will soon be changing. with our new email addresses, but for now, this works. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening. It's been a great time learning with you. Robert's Rules is something that we're all still learning, so we appreciate you working with us. But without any other notes or any other questions, I'd like to go ahead and recognize our YDSC officers and members. Just shake a wave if you can, give us a smile or a whoop, 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 whoop. We'd appreciate it. And thanks all of you that are young Dems at heart. We love you guys too. And when we work together, we can definitely take back the state. So we appreciate you all. And for all of those with cameras off, if we can, come on camera. And Jenny, I'm going to ask you to take another screenshot for us. We would appreciate it. So here we are.
Don't worry, I'll do a countdown. So for everyone who's ready, and no, I won't be able to preview it or anything, but all right. 1, 2, 3. All right. Everyone looks beautiful.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Well, we will be in touch very soon. Again, thank you all so much. And if you missed it, go and watch Lady Gaga and J-Lo again, because they were absolutely fantastic. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you very much. Good night.
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 Bye, everyone. Good night.